Hello, welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I want to talk about Lando Norris and his future career prospects and what he should do moving forward in Formula One. So before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about Norris's junior record and how he got to Formula One and why people say he's such a highly prized talent. So in 2015, his first full year in single seaters, not including Ginetta Juniors, he finished first in the MSA Formula Championship, which was effectively British Formula 4. 2016, he did 3 different series full time. He did Euro Cup, Formula Renault, he did Formula Renault 2.0 NEC, and he did the Toyota Racing Series, and he came first in all 3. 2017, he moved to Euro Formula 3, the old half of the current Formula 3, as well as what was GP3, and he finished first in his rookie season there. In his only season of Formula 2 in 2018, which he then moved up to, he finished second behind George Russell, the current Mercedes driver. And I think just looking at that record, he won every season, every single series he did on his first attempt, except for Formula 2, where he finished second, which even as a rookie is still an extremely impressive feat. And looking at other drivers who have had similar career paths as him, who are about similar age, you can really only put a handful of drivers in that category, including Charles Leclerc and George Russell, both of whom are in front-running teams. They both have a win. George has many podiums, Charles has many podiums as well. Lando Norris is the only of the 3 who has no wins and only has 6 podiums. Does have that 1 pole position from the Russian Grand Prix in 2021. But I think it really begs the question, what is Lando Norris' future at McLaren? This is probably the 3rd year in a row where they've taken a bit of a step backwards, not really a full step forward. And with the 2nd year of the new regulations, I think the first year making some mistakes with the development of the car, that was a bit understandable. They still had probably the 4th fastest car, tied with Alpine, 4th, 5th fastest car, and they come this year with another really poor car to start the year. They've been jumped by Aston Martin. Alpine's still probably a little bit ahead of them. They're probably about the same as Haas, Alfa Romeo, and they're kind of in this lower midfield area, which they really don't want to be in. And for Norris, this is really a place he doesn't want to be in either. So I'm just going to go through Norris's Formula 1 record up to now, just so that we can get an idea of this. So 2019, his first season, 49 points, 11th in the Drivers' Championship, 4th in the Constructors' Championship, no podiums. His first year in McLaren, he was a very positive first season. 2020, 97 points, 9th in the Championship, Drivers' Champion, 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, and his first podium at the first race of the season, the 2020 Austrian Grand Prix. 2021, a big step forward in terms of point total. Obviously, this is aided by the car getting better. 160 points, 6th in the Championship, 4th in the Constructors' Championship, so they actually get jumped by Ferrari in the Constructors, and 4 podiums this year for Norris. So statistically, his best year to date in Formula 1. And last year, 2022, 122 points, so about 40 less than the year before, 7th in the Championship, best of the non-Ferrari, Mercedes, or Red Bull drivers, 5th in the Constructors, probably could have finished 4th if Ricciardo had performed a bit better, and 1 podium, which was at Imola last year. I think for Norris, it really begs the question, if you want to move up the grid, if you want to challenge for race wins, championships, is McLaren the place to do it long term? And many people have said that, and many people at McLaren have said that Lando Norris has a buyout-proof contract that has no escape clauses until 2025. That being said, buyouts can happen, money can always change hands. In Formula 1, F1 contracts are worth about as much as the paper they're written on, is an expression that's commonly said. And unlike other sports like hockey, for example, where contracts are generally very strict, very solid, there's many buyout clauses, many performance clauses in F1 contracts. And we don't really get to see the actual details in terms of what these clauses are, the money that changes hands, bonuses, that kind of thing. So it's very kind of much like an underground business. So for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to kind of speculate openly, probably is going to stay at McLaren until 2025, possibly the year before. But regardless, I think if I'm Norris, I think I want to compete for championships. Maybe now is a good time to start looking at other options and see what options there are for me when I can get out of my contract or when my contract ends. And I think for Norris, there's probably 4 teams that he may look at, 4 to 5 teams he may look at in 2025 or whenever that contract is. And I'm just going to go through each of them and talk about maybe why he would choose them or why he wouldn't, and what's most realistic for him long term. So first I have Red Bull. So Red Bull current constructors, championship constructors, leaders. Of course, they're a team that's very much focused on Max Verstappen. That being said, the rumor is that Red Bull have been trying to recruit him almost nonstop since 2018. I remember mid-2018, there were rumors that he was going to replace Brendan Hartley at Toro Rosso at the 2018 Grand Prix, at the 2018 Canadian Grand Prix. So clearly Red Bull really like him and they really want to bring him in despite having Verstappen already there. And I think if I'm Red Bull, I think you have to take the fact that you need to have only reason that you would not have 2 number 1 drivers, which Norris could potentially compete with Verstappen. I'm not saying he will, but he potentially could, is if you're competing for a championship with Red Bull currently are. That being said, I think there's a chance that they'll replace Perez after his contract's done. And Norris would definitely be a driver that they could target, especially given that there's so many rumors about Verstappen potentially retiring at the end of his contract in 2028. And you need to always have a backup plan in Formula 1 in case your star driver leaves or retires. So I think Red Bull would be definitely a really good option, probably the best option on this list. Maybe not the most realistic, but I think a really good option. Next is Mercedes. So time, as much as some people would not like to admit it, time waits for no one, time catches up to everyone, and eventually Lewis Hamilton will retire from Formula 1. I think when that does happen, whether it be the end of this year, 2024, or 2 years or more down the line, they will be looking, they being Mercedes, will be looking for a really good driver and to potentially complement George Russell. And I think Norris would do a really good job of that. Of course, same caveat that I said with Red Bull. Do you want to build around 2 number 1 drivers, 2 alpha drivers? Well, it really depends on where the team's at that point in time. And I think for Mercedes, I think Norris would probably be one of the best options that they could get at that time. And for Norris, I think going into the 26 regulations, Mercedes would be a really good shout. They're an engine manufacturer, and they also have experience making their own engines, which is why they were so successful at the start of the turbo hybrid era, which is something that's a bit of an asterisk with the Red Bull Powertrains Ford project, is that they don't really have a ton of experience making the powertrain from the engine from scratch, which Mercedes do. Next is Ferrari. So Ferrari, bit of a similar situation to Mercedes. There'd be probably a bit of a step up. Unfortunately, though, it's Ferrari, and there's always going to be lots of internal turmoil, lots of internal politics, and I don't know if it's really the best spot for him. Of course, for him to go there, one of their current drivers, Sainz or Leclerc, would have to leave. And, in a potential Hamilton retirement scenario, I could easily see Leclerc going to Mercedes or Sainz going to a Audi, for example, or going to Sauber in preparation for Audi, and maybe that would open up a seat there. That being said, I don't think it's probably not going to be one of the higher teams on his list. I think there's better options available long term, especially with the cost cap being further along. Teams like Ferrari that have historically spent lots and lots of money in Formula 1, but haven't really had the results to show it, I think may not be as attractive options long term. Next, last 2 options I think are a bit more of a wildcard options. One of them is Aston Martin. So for Aston Martin, I think for Norris, it would be an interesting fit to a team that's certainly on the up. And of course, I think similar to Hamilton, Alonso will have to retire eventually. And there's a pretty good chance that's within the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, which would be around the timeline when Norris may be trying to leave McLaren. Of course, there's the other considerations, which is this is Lawrence Stroll's team. He's building this team around his son, Lance Stroll. And I really doubt whether or not Lawrence Stroll would want to bring in a driver who's very similar in age. I don't think there's any doubt that Norris is a better driver than Lance Stroll, but I think a very similar driver in age to Lance, who would effectively be a direct competitor to long term. And I know there's rumored to be some bad blood between Stroll Senior and some of the other drivers of Lance Stroll's age in terms of how politicking around the junior formula and who's getting what seat and what series and stuff. So I think that from Norris's perspective, it's a really attractive project, and with maybe potentially Aston Martin trying to link up with another engine manufacturer such as Honda, I think from Norris's side this could be a really attractive option, but I really doubt whether or not Stroll Senior would actually allow that to happen. Now the last option I have is Sauber/Audi. So for right now it's Alfa Romeo Sauber. At the end of this year it will become Sauber again, and then in 2026 it will effectively become the Audi works team. And Lando Norris's old team boss, Andrea Stella, actually moved from McLaren to Sauber to effectively be the CEO of the Audi project going forward long term. And I think if you're Audi, Norris is definitely the kind of driver that you would want to build the project around. From Norris's side, I think it's still a bit of a risk. It's a new project. You don't know if it's going to be another Toyota where there's tons of money, tons of investment, very low results, or if it's going to be a Mercedes, a team that kind of shows up, builds for 3 to 4 years, and then becomes a championship winner and becomes one of the most dominant teams in F1 history. So I think there's quite a bit of risk there with that Audi option. I think an option like a Mercedes is probably going to be the safest option long-term for Norris. That being said, I think what he does long-term also really depends on how McLaren does. If McLaren do eventually start to show some improvement, and he's still happy being there long-term, of course this video could all be for naught and he could decide to stay there long-term. But let me know what you think. Where do you think Lando Norris ends up long-term? Do you think he stays at McLaren? Do you think he goes to another team such as a Mercedes or Red Bull? If so, what team do you think he would go to? And please like the video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe if you want to see more content. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.